mile emergency planning zone around each nuclear power plant, and it is only within this zone that there are plans and emergency drills for evacuation, sheltering in place and stockpiling of potassium iodide, which can eliminate thyroid cancers caused by radioactive iodine. Yet in Japan, the NRC has recommended a 50-mile evacuation zone for residents of the United States. Cesium has been found at levels that triggered relocation after Chernobyl 25 miles away. So the NRC has provided potassium iodide to its staff in Japan. The U.S. Embassy is making it available to U.S. personnel as far away as Tokyo. And the U.S. government is stockpiling it outside the 50-mile evacuation zone. Mr. Lyman, the NRC has obviously concluded that a 10-mile emergency planning zone isn't large enough to deal with the Japanese meltdown. Do you think the emergency zone in the United States is large enough at 10 miles?
No, Congressman Markey, I do not. I believe that U.S. plants are vulnerable to the type of event we've seen in Fukushima, and that event has demonstrated there could be significant radiological exposures far beyond 10 miles.
Yeah. You know, after Chernobyl, everyone, and I was the chair of the committee, the Energy Subcommittee that had a hearing right after Chernobyl, and everyone said, well, you know, that's a bad design at Chernobyl and a repressive political regime, and it couldn't happen here. That was that hearing. At this hearing, however, it's more difficult because Japan is our technological equal. You know, we import all of our electronic equipment from Japan that we buy on a daily basis. So it's obvious that we can learn a lot of lessons, if we're willing to, from Japan and be a little more modest about mankind's ability to control nature, to control unpredicted events technologically. Let me move on. In terms of the spent fuel, which has been one of the main sources of radiation at the Japanese nuclear reactors. In 2008, Chairman Yaskow said that he believed that, quote, the most clear-cut example of an area where additional safety margins can be gained involves additional efforts to move spent nuclear fuel from pools to dry cask storage. Dr. Lyman, do you agree that the chances of a spent fuel fire and radiation release would be lower if spent fuel was moved out of the giant swimming pools and into dry cask storage as soon as possible?
Yes, I do believe that you would get a lower risk if you remove some of the fuel from the pools, reducing the density and reducing the heat load, and also improving the potential for circulation between assemblies.
So some people might say that the likelihood of anything bad happening is so small that there really isn't any difference between having them in the swimming pools or moving them into dry cask. What would you say to that?
Well, I would say what happened in Fukushima shows us that we do not really understand the fundamental likelihood of a variety of accidents. It's apparent that there was already a challenge to one of the spent fuel pools that was probably not predicted. It surprised a lot of people, and so I would say there's going to have to be a reevaluation of what we do know and what we don't know.
Yeah. So a terrorist might be able to attack one of these swimming pools outside a nuclear power plant?
Yes, there's always a concern that a terrorist attack on a spent fuel pool could cause what's called a rapid drain down, which would lead to an overheating of the pool in a relatively short period of time.
And again, these swimming pools are not inside a containment dome in the United States. They're outside of the containment dome. Is that correct?
That's right. They're not contained within the primary containment, and the structure they are contained around the reactor building is not designed to be leak tight or pressure resistant.
And we learned from documents captured from al-Qaeda that nuclear power plants are at the very top of the terrorist target list of al-Qaeda in the United States. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with the intelligence, but the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has said that there's an ongoing threat to U.S. nuclear power plants.
Thank you. The meltdown in Japan was caused by an electricity outage that was itself triggered by the earthquake and tsunami. But most nuclear reactors here are only required to have 7 days' worth of diesel fuel for their emergency generators and only 4 to 8 hours' worth of battery capacity in the event of their diesel generators failing. In Japan, the reactors had 8 hours' worth of battery generation capacity. Don't you agree that the NRC's regulation should be changed to require more diesel fuel and greater battery capacity in order to give emergency responders more time to be able to figure out the physics and the electronics of the mess that they could be confronted with because of some natural disaster?
Yes, I do agree that there needs to be a reexamination of the assumptions about the ability to rescue a plan in need in the event of a significant natural disaster or terrorist attack that could have damage to the surrounding infrastructure. I think the assumptions for a coping capability at plants are based on overly optimistic assumptions about the arrival of the cavalry.
Yeah, I thank you, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman.